The courtyard of Windsor Castle is no stranger to curious tourists. But on one bright morning, what began as harmless laughter quickly spiraled into a scene straight out of a thriller. A group of young men thought it would be funny to tie up a royal guard as a joke. 5 minutes later, the cobblestones shook with the boots of an armed response unit charging in. What happened in those tense moments shocked onlookers, shook security protocols, and left one tourist's life forever changed. If stories like this leave you on the edge of your seat, stick around. This one only gets more intense. While you're here, don't forget to tap that like button, subscribe for more emotional royal stories, and share this video with friends who love history, tradition, and unbelievable true events. It really helps us bring you more incredible tales from behind the palace gates. The morning sun painted Windsor Castle in golden light, stretching shadows across its cobblestone courtyard. It was a scene that had repeated itself for centuries. Stone walls holding secrets of royalty, and the famous red-coated guards standing watch, silent as statues. On this particular morning, Sergeant James Mitchell adjusted his scarlet tunic and pulled his bearskin hat firmly into place. At 28, James had been a Queen's Guard for 6 years. 6 years of learning to march with flawless precision. 6 years of standing motionless no matter the weather. 6 years of tuning out tourists who tried everything to break that legendary stoic composure. For James, every detail of the job was second nature. The weight of his rifle resting against his shoulder, the rhythm of his boots striking stone, the steady breathing that helped him ignore distractions. But beneath the stillness, his senses were always sharp. A guard's role might look ceremonial to outsiders, yet the truth was far more serious. Each one of them was a trained soldier, tasked with protecting some of the most important people and places in the United Kingdom. Already, the courtyard was filling with life. Schoolchildren pressed against barriers, their teachers whispering bits of royal history, elderly couples fiddled with smartphones trying to capture the perfect photo. Young backpackers laughed as they posed for selfies with the statue-like guards behind them. To the world, it was all spectacle. To James, it was routine, a routine that demanded absolute discipline. Still, he wasn't blind to the humor in it all. He'd seen tourists make faces just inches from his own, seen grown men wave toy swords as if they were knights, even watched musicians belt out songs just to coax a smirk. Most of it, he could let roll past him like waves against rock. That was part of the job. But there was something else that came with standing so still for so long, an acute awareness of the unusual. A shift in tone, a strange burst of laughter, or a cluster of eyes watching him a little too intently. These were the signals he had trained himself to notice. And on that morning, James noticed exactly that. A group of 5 young men stepped into the crowd. They were loud, dressed in designer clothes, expensive cameras hanging from their shoulders. Unlike most tourists who carried a quiet respect, even when teasing the guards, this group radiated entitlement. They laughed too loudly, pointed too openly, and whispered with a mischievous energy that prickled James's instincts.
From behind his frozen gaze, James caught fragments of their conversation. The American accents, the bets about making him move, the camera rolling in the leader's hand. It was nothing he hadn't seen before, at least not yet, but something about the way they lingered, plotting, watching, felt different. James remained unflinching, but inside, his soldier's instincts told him this morning was about to turn into anything but routine. At first, it seemed like nothing more than the usual game, a group of friends trying to get a laugh, trying to capture that one viral moment. The leader of the pack, a tall blonde American named Tyler, grinned as he pointed toward James. "I bet you $100 I can make him move," he boasted, his voice carrying across the courtyard. His friends laughed, pulling out wallets in mock ceremony. Phones were already out, cameras recording every second. To them, this wasn't Windsor Castle, it was a stage. And Sergeant James Mitchell, just another actor in costume. James remained motionless, eyes fixed straight ahead, his training an iron wall against their antics. Tyler pulled exaggerated faces inches from him, cracked crude jokes, even waved his arms like a street performer. The crowd chuckled, some shaking their heads, others egging him on. But James didn't so much as blink. That should have been the end of it. A failed prank, a moment of embarrassment, and the group moving on. But Tyler wasn't ready to quit. He wanted something bigger, something his followers online would never forget. Okay, okay, he whispered to his friends, his grin sharp with mischief. Let's take it up a level. Imagine if I tied him up. That would go viral. The words hung in the air like a spark over dry tinder. His friends exchanged uneasy glances. A couple laughed nervously, assuming he was joking. But when Tyler unzipped his backpack and pulled out a length of rope, the mood shifted. One friend grabbed his arm. Dude, that's too far. You'll get arrested. These guys have guns. But Tyler brushed him off with a cocky laugh. Relax. It's just a joke. We'll tie him up, snap a photo, and untie him right after. 30 seconds. Tops. He won't even react. Other tourists nearby had begun to notice. Some whispered with concern. Parents pulled their children back from the growing commotion. And one older British man, his voice firm and weathered, stepped forward. Young man, I don't think you understand what you're doing, he warned. These guards are not performers. They are soldiers. Soldiers. You're playing a very dangerous game. Tyler sneered, brushing the warning aside with a dismissive wave. Chill out, Grandpa. It's all for fun. Everyone love it. James heard it all, every word, though his gaze never wavered. Beneath the bearskin hat, his mind sharpened. Training took over. A flicker of eye contact with Corporal Sarah Williams, stationed a few yards away, was enough. She was alert now, too, ready to step in. The rope dangled in Tyler's hands, sunlight glinting off its fibers. He stepped closer, grinning as though he were about to perform the greatest trick of his life. The crowd leaned forward, some with phones raised high, others frozen in uneasy silence. What Tyler didn't realize was simple. The moment that rope touched the uniform of a Queen's Guard, his prank would cross an invisible line. And once that line was crossed, there would be no turning back. The rope swung in Tyler's hand as he leaned in. The crowd hushed, breath caught in their throats. And then, the moment his fingers brushed against the scarlet fabric of Sergeant James Mitchell's tunic, everything changed. James shifted, breaking the stillness he had held for hours. It was only a small step, but it was sharp, deliberate, and full of authority. His voice, rarely heard by tourists, rang out across the courtyard like a thunderclap. Sir, step back immediately. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Some flinched at the sudden sound. Others raised their cameras higher, unsure if this was part of the show. But Tyler just smirked, misinterpreting the guard's warning as entertainment. Oh, he talks, he jeered. This is even better. He reached forward again, rope extended. That was it. The line crossed. With soldier's precision, James seized Tyler's wrist in a firm, unyielding grip. In the same movement, he lifted his rifle into a defensive stance. He didn't point it, but the message was unmistakable. This was no performance. Release the rope and step back now, James commanded. His voice was steady, his training radiating through every syllable. You are interfering with the Queen's Guard in the performance of his duties. For the first time, Tyler's grin faltered. But before he could react, James pressed the emergency alert clip to his uniform. A silent signal pulsed through Windsor Castle, triggering protocol few tourists ever imagined exist. And then the world erupted. From hidden corners of the courtyard, plainclothes officers surged forward. Armed police sprinted from side gates, their boots striking stone in unison. Radios crackled, orders barked. Within seconds, the quiet crowd of tourists became the backdrop to a full-scale royal security response. Armed police, shouted Constable David Chen as he broke through the crowd, hand hovering near his weapon. Everyone remain calm. Stay where you are. The tourists scattered back, children clutched by anxious parents, phones still recording. Tyler froze, pale now, as James held his wrist locked in place. Officer, it's a misunderstanding, he stammered. It was just a joke. But the rope on the ground told a different story. Within 3 minutes, the courtyard was transformed. More officers flooded in, establishing a perimeter. Tyler's friends were pulled aside, questioned, their cameras confiscated. Corporal Sarah Williams, rifle at the ready, scanned the crowd for threats, prepared for the unthinkable, that Tyler might not be acting alone. Then came the final blow to Tyler's bravado. Captain Rebecca Morrison, the commanding officer of the Queen's Guard, marching into the scene in full uniform. Her voice cut like steel. Sergeant Mitchell, report. James replied crisply, never loosening his grip. American tourists attempted to bind me with rope for purposes of photographs. Subject ignored command to desist. Emergency protocol activated. The captain's eyes fell on Tyler, who now stood trembling, surrounded by armed police. So, she said coldly, you have just committed a serious offense against Her Majesty's Guard. This will not be treated as a joke. 5 minutes. That's all it took for Windsor Castle to shift from laughter and selfies to a high-security operation. For Tyler, it was the moment his dream of going viral twisted into a nightmare that would follow him for years. 3 weeks later, the grandeur of Windsor Castle was replaced by the solemn atmosphere of a London courtroom. Tyler Jackson, once grinning, rope in hand, now sat pale and hunched beside his solicitor. His parents had flown in from Los Angeles, their faces etched with disbelief. This wasn't the European vacation they'd imagined. The courtroom was packed. Journalists filled the benches, their pens scratching, cameras waiting outside to capture the young American who had dared to lay hands on the Queen's Guard. For the British public, the case was more than one man's foolish mistake. It was a matter of respect for tradition, for the monarchy, and for those who stood in uniform to protect it. The prosecution wasted no time. Crown Prosecutor Sarah Williams laid out the case. The rope purchase in London the day before, the research into guard schedules found in Tyler's hotel room, the warnings from friends and bystanders that he ignored. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment prank. She argued. This was premeditated. The defendant's actions, she told the court, were not the careless antics of a tourist. They were deliberate, calculated, and dangerous. He sought fame at the expense of national security. James Mitchell, the guard at the center of it all, gave testimony with the same calm professionalism he showed on duty. His words were steady, but their weight was undeniable. When the rope touched my uniform, I had to assume the worst, he explained. For all I knew, this could have been the beginning of a larger coordinated attack. My duty is to protect the castle and its residents. I had to respond as though it were real. The court listened in silence. For the first time, Tyler seemed to grasp the gravity of what he'd done. Gone was the smack, the cocky energy. In its place was a young man realizing that 5 minutes of chasing likes and shares had placed him on the wrong side of the law in a foreign country. His defense solicitor painted a different picture. Tyler as a naive young man caught up in the pressures of social media, someone who had never meant genuine harm. She urged the court to consider his youth, his remorse, and his lack of prior offenses. But the evidence was overwhelming. Tyler himself had to admit, under oath, that he'd planned the stunt for days. He broke down, insisting through tears, "I thought the guards were like performers, like Disneyland. I didn't realize they were real soldiers." Justice Patricia Henley, presiding over the case, wasn't swayed by his excuses. "You researched. You purchased rope. You ignored every warning," she told him. This was not ignorance. This was a choice, and choices of consequences. When the verdict came, guilty on charges of assault, interference with military personnel, and disturbance of the peace, the weight of it hit Tyler like a storm. His parents wept quietly in the gallery. Tyler himself sat frozen, as though still trying to wake from a nightmare. The boy who wanted to go viral had just gone down in history, not as a star, but as a cautionary tale. The verdict against Tyler Jackson reverberated far beyond the walls of the courtroom. For weeks, headlines splashed across newspapers. American tourist jail for assaulting Queen's Guard. News anchors debated the cultural clash. Social media buzzed with outrage and ridicule. And late-night hosts joke about the tourists who mistook soldiers for actors. But beneath the noise, the incident sparked serious conversations. At Windsor Castle, new barriers were quietly installed, creating greater distance between tourists and guards. Additional security cameras were fitted, and officers in plain clothes became a permanent part of the visitor landscape. What had once been seen as a harmless tradition, teasing the stoic guards, was now re-examined under a harsher light. Colonel James Harrison, commander of Windsor Castle Security, called the incident a wake-up call. He told reporters, even seemingly innocent tourists can pose very real threats. We must be vigilant, always. For Sergeant James Mitchell, the man at the center of it all, life moved forward, but not unchanged. He was commended for his composure and quick response, praised as an example in new training manuals. Yet he admitted to colleagues that the incident had altered the way he viewed the crowds. Where once he saw playful curiosity, he now scanned for danger. The innocence of the job had been chipped away. As for Tyler, his fate was sealed. 18 months in a British prison, a sentence meant not only to punish, but to send a message. He was also ordered to pay restitution for the increased security costs his actions had triggered. His dreams of internet fame had come true in the darkest way possible, his name forever tied to shame. Back in the United States, Tyler's story was used in schools and universities as a modern cautionary tale. Teachers spoke of it when discussing respect for other cultures, law enforcement, and the dangerous law of viral stunts. 5 minutes of fun, they warned students, could cost you a lifetime of regret. And so, a rope in the hands of one young man became more than just a prank. It became a symbol of entitlement, of recklessness, but also of accountability. For every tourist who walks past the guards of Windsor Castle now, there's a little more hesitation, a little more reverence, because the world has seen what happens when the line between joke and threat is crossed. History often remembers kings and queens, wars and treaties, but sometimes history remembers a guard who stood his ground, a prank that went too far, and a lesson that echoed across nations. So, what began as a silly dare ended as an international scandal, one that changed security at royal palaces forever. Tyler wanted 15 seconds of fame, but instead, he found 18 months behind bars. What do you think? Should the punishment have been this severe, or was it exactly what was needed to protect tradition and safety? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It really helps us bring more emotional and eye-opening stories from behind the palace gates. And as always, thank you for watching.